Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. It's 9 o'clock. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda. Any additions or corrections?
Motion approved. Yes. Motion approved the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes from last week.
Motion approved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Actually, yes.
No, I didn't.
And as now we're starting the public comment period, I do want to bring up that with new pending litigation, no comments can be stated today on either the Erickson CUP or the zoning office. And if you have comments for anything else, you can. We're advised not to take any comments on litigation.
I believe that
You have to state your name and...
Michael Fields, Winnebago Valley, I believe that just means that you are not obligated to talk about ongoing litigation. But anyway,
We are not, public
Commissioners.
comment doesn't allow any...
a little while ago, you were served with a writ of mandamus
I'm sorry, Mike, we can't hear
containing
this.
a judge's order commanding environmental services to follow the law.
We might have to recess the meeting, I think.
Hold on one
It's-
second. Can I just ask one quick question? How does that work? I'm not familiar with,
When there's pending litigation during public comment period, you are not allowed to discuss it.
so the public can't talk about it or we can't talk about
You
it?
can't talk about it.
We put it right in our policy. Matters currently under negotiation, litigation, or related to personnel will not be discussed in this forum.
So which litigation?
We were served yesterday with some papers.
Okay, that I'm not aware of.
You got it this morning, I believe.
Yeah, I have just got it
Okay.
4
I
minutes
think,
ago, so I don't
I
know.
think we had copies of it yesterday too, about 4 o'clock. Okay, I did send it to everybody.
I did not email it out to everybody. Because I didn't want to do the public or that open meeting law.
Anyway, we
We have
can't,
copies of this.
yes.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I have later.
This is the first I've seen of it.
Well, I got served it yesterday, so because of that, we can't have it. in
So
public
Commissioner Shoney,
comment.
it's a writ of mandamus containing a judge's order that
Mike,
commands environmental services to
Can
follow
you
the
make a
law.
definition? I don't-
We would have to recess the meeting. Mike, we can't take this now, thank you.
I'm not responsible for that policy. I believe that
We are
it's
responsible
you
for the
who are
policy.
not obligated
I'll
to
make a
talk
motion
about
that we
ongoing.
recess for 15 minutes.
For a second.
Let the press know. Do they have a copy of this? They need to know. You're trying to silence the press from knowing too.
No, we are.
They can have a copy of it.
They can, the press can have a copy of it, that's not a problem. We just can't discuss it at the public comment period. And since I did receive it yesterday.
I'll read it.
Is there any other public comments not related to either of the issues pending?
Brian Megler, Youth 10 Township. I'd like to bring up the fact that on some of your study group for and the zoning commission, some of the participants have an interest in sand mining. They either have mines on their property, they sell sand, or are involved in some sand-related business, and so they have an obvious conflict of interest, and therefore they need to recuse themselves from any further action on these matters. I'd also like to bring up the fact that you've asked the wrong question from the beginning. You've asked, how can we permit Erickson's mine?
We can't discuss this, I'm sorry.
I can't say a word.
Not about pending litigation.
This isn't. Will you let me finish?
You can't use the word Erickson, conditional use permit, you cannot.
The question you should have asked.
Right. Okay. Can we just hold on a second? Because I gotta ask this question too. Is Janie available to come down just so we can clarify? Because my only question is, and I'm not clear on this, is how do we, if they've got a comment, it's their First Amendment right to speak out. I'm just asking, Teresa, I'm just asking, I understand, we can't say anything for discussion, but we can't listen.
No, it's in a public
The policy is wrong, we have First
I'm
Amendment.
not talking about that mine, I'm talking about something general.
10 minutes and talk to Jamie.
Yeah, I'd be fine with talking to
We'll
Jamie.
recess the
I'll
meeting.
second that.
Sure. Yep, can you call her over, please?
Yep.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
We just got a call from the county attorney who is busy in court at this time, and she states that according to our Houston County policy, we cannot take any comments from the public on pending litigation. Also, MCIT, right in front of me, said that we don't guarantee the right to speak at a meeting that's open to the public. If a public body chooses to allow public comment, the body can set the parameters for those comments. And we have done that, so at this time, anything referring to Erickson or zoning office cannot be brought up at this part of the meeting.
So may I continue?
If you don't use the word Erickson or zoning office.
Okay. Like I said before, I think there's a conflict of interest on the part of some of the people who are sitting on the study group committee and the zoning board because they have interests in sand mining. They are selling sand, have mines on their property, or stand to benefit in some way financially if sand mining is allowed in this county. And therefore, they should recuse themselves from all such actions. From the beginning, you've asked the wrong question. You've asked, how can we permit mining in this county, rather than what is the right and legal thing to do? If you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. So consequently, the entire process that you followed has been in error. I'd also ask you to look at who's the special interest in this whole discussion. Look at the people who are resisting mining here. They are good people. Most of them gain nothing personally from their struggle. They sacrifice their time and money to protect the common good and to preserve the future, not for personal gain. We do not represent a special interest. We represent the citizens asking for justice. There are 3 neighbors to one of the mines that stand to lose their peace and quiet as well as their property value. A certain person will steal that value. Why should this be allowed? Thank you.
I don't like to come to the board. Robin Shumper of Crescent Township. I want to first thank Justin and Dana for standing up for First Amendment rights. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, I don't know what kind of a county we have anymore. Totalitarianism is when the government seeks to hold authority over society and seeks to control all aspects of public and private life wherever possible. And I feel like this board in total is operating in kind of a fascist and totalitarian manner, and I just want you to know how disappointed I am and how I feel that it's very necessary to keep a keen eye on everything that this body does, because it doesn't seem to be in the best interest of most people. We were called special interests at one of the committee groups. We haven't even been allowed in some of the committees that even though they're supposed to be open meetings if they're an extension of this board. And we're told we can't get up and go to the bathroom, or we can't come back into the room. We can't move our seats. I have a back problem, for example, and if I get uncomfortable, I may need to change seats or go walk around for a minute. But if I do that, I can't come back into a meeting. That's just wrong. And on all levels, it's totally against my rights as a person who might have a disability. So there are so many problems with so many of your committees and the way that they're acting right now. And we're being called a special interest, even though, as Brian just pointed out, if we're spending our time and our money to try to fight this issue against the people who you're encouraging to gain money from this issue. And many of those people are county employees. So you have to ask yourself, who's really the special interest in this thing? Thank you, and I would appreciate it if you could act more in a democratic manner.
Okay, and the public hearing is ended, we need to move on to Don Nelson.
Well, they had 2 more minutes worth.
I'm sorry, but we have recess.
You recess.
And you already-
Excuse me, but I did not already speak, remember? That's what
I
this
know,
was
but the
all
public
about.
comment period has ended.
I don't believe so. Wasn't there a
Yes, it is.
clause for, when you consulted with your attorney?
Yes, there was.
Well, it just seems to me that
I'm
this
sorry, but we
hearing
need to move on
directly
with the rest of
from,
our agenda.
hearing directly from the public seems to be a little bit more democracy than some of y'all can handle.
We've been very democratic over the time, but right now we have
But
to
now we're
move on.
going to stop doing
We
that?
need to move on. We have an agenda item at 9:15 and it's 20 after.
Well, you were the ones, excuse me,
I'm sorry,
who
but
wasted
that's
the
what it
time
is.
talking to an attorney.
Please
Oh.
step back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Point of order, is he first on the agenda for next week then?
Forbidden words.
You have a paragraph?
Moving on, Don Nelson, DNR.
Good morning, my name is Don Nelson, I'm the Area Wildlife Supervisor with Minnesota DNR. I work out of the Rochester office. I cover 6-county area in southeastern Minnesota, including Houston County. In front of you this morning, we're interested in acquiring land in Mount Curry in Union Township. It's a 287-acre tract. Should have a map in your packet. I've got some maps with me if you'd like a different map. I'm here seeking the county board's approval to acquire this land. It's required by law whenever we acquire land for a state wildlife management area that we obtain county board approval. We're also required to notify affected townships, and we have sent letters. I've sent letters to both townships, Union and Mount Curry. I've offered to meet with those town boards to discuss the project. I've not heard back from either township at this point.
But you did let them know.
I did let them know.
That's what all we really
Yes,
asked.
and there's copies of those letters in your packet. It's 287 acres of primarily floodplain. Well, it's all primarily floodplain. Most of it's wetland or wet pasture. There's no tillable land included in this parcel. We've excluded the building site. We parceled off about 10 acres around the building site, so that will remain. And the current family currently residing in that building site will stay there. The other thing we did on this parcel is we have close to a mile of the old railroad grade runs through this property. As a matter of policy, we don't allow state trails on wildlife management areas, but we've accommodated that in this case by using separate funds to acquire the railroad grade, so that won't be part of the wildlife management area. So essentially that portion, if the trail ever extends to Hoga, that portion of the trail is already in place.
That's a good news. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we anticipated that would be an issue, and we didn't want to have problems down the road or block efforts to extend the trail. The other issue we hear quite a bit is that there's concern about loss of tax revenue. The state does not pay tax on lands that we acquire. We do make payments in lieu of taxes. In this case, the payments in lieu of taxes are based on a formula on what we pay for the land. And then after you people, when the county reassesses the land at some point in the future, it'll be based on a formula on your assessed value. In this case, the payment in lieu of taxes is going to be roughly 20 to 25% higher than the tax revenue being generated from the property now.
And the property owners are fine with?
The property owners wanted the property to be in public ownership. That as a legacy to Mrs. Sather's mother, Laura Arnett. Sounds like she was quite a woman. She ran the farm. Her husband died. She raised the family. She ran a successful farm and actually expanded the farm and what's by any means less than prime farmland. And she actually died in a tractor accident on that property. So it's the Sather's wish that the land be in public ownership as a legacy to her.
Wonderful. And did I read that right, that then it's open?
It'll be open to public use, public hunting, hiking, fishing. There's quite a bit of frontage along the Root River. It won't be open to camping, it won't be open to ATV use or horseback riding. Whatever trail uses are eventually allowed if the trail's extended, those of course will be acceptable. Berry picking, those sorts of uses are encouraged on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, very good, very nice, thank
Can I ask
you.
a question?
Sure.
When would this be open for public use?
We've taken an option on the property, which is contingent on county court approval. We would close fairly soon on that option. It would still then need to go through an administrative process to be designated as a wildlife management area. And at that point, we could post signs along the boundaries for public use.
So you need a motion on the resolution to,
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve, that we go forward with the resolution for DNR land acquisition.
Second?
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good, and thank you, it sounds like a very good, for all of us.
Well, thank you.
And I'll email you then a certified copy of that resolution.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Okay, you're welcome.
No, okay. Ryan?
Morning. I have 3 items I'd like to get approved today. The first item is on County State Highway 2 in the city of Eitzen. There's some water main breaks down in Eitzen this winter. One of the locations there was the pavement in the intersection was in bad shape, so the whole intersection was just warped and dips and rough shape. So the city called me down there, wanted to know if the county would participate in participating for some of the costs of fixing the intersection completely instead of just patching up another water main break. My recommendation to the city, and I spoke with Steve about this at the time, was to maybe have the county pay for half the cost of the pavement corrections down there, then the city pay for half the cost, because some of it's city utility related, some of it's just age and wear and tear on the pavement. So the city went out and got a couple quotes on the cost, or 3 of them on the cost to replace the blacktop. Based on those quotes, the county's portion, the cost would be $8,574. That'd be 50% of the cost of the one main water main break intersection. The other locations around the city that had breaks and patches would be 100% city to pay for it. So if I can approve all that, and I don't know if you have anything to add, Steve.
Not really, I guess, the city officials, the officials had an understanding, I guess, that half the street in that one area pretty much was, was damaged county property, and the other half was from a main break, water main break, repaired, so. It's just one of those things.
And a lot of them this winter,
Yeah.
even with our jail problem. So we need a motion to work with the city of Eitzen on this?
I don't know that I can make the motion.
No.
City clerk.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
You're abstaining, Steve?
I will stay in that, yeah. Yeah. That's the part.
Update on the detour?
Detour update, sure, and I'll go County 5 the next. So County 5 is now officially closed. Signs went up on a lot of the roadway this past weekend. The contractor failed to install the signs along part of the detour route over the weekend, so those signs went up this morning. So now the detour is officially up and County 5 is now torn up, so traffic cannot get through the intersection of County 5 and 249. Yeah, if everything goes smoothly, we hope to be able to get the intersection of 249 open back up by the weekend. It's not going to open the roadway back up, so traffic in town will be able to turn to go down into the Freeburg direction, but you won't be able to come up the street beyond 249. So, met with the city and their police chief, city mayor, and administrator talked about, you know, the tentative schedule here. And everything's going closely mapped out at this point. So, and then on the same subject, I've been talking to Caledonia Township, and they'd like to have a formal agreement put in place to utilize South Prairie Drive as part of the detour route. Usually what we do with a lot of townships is when we have going to utilize the township roadways part of our project, the township says, you know, you guys just maintain the road, blade it up, add a little bit of rock if needed, when you're done, so the roadway gets back to us in the same shape to end as what it does at the beginning. Caledonia Township is essentially asking for us to do the same thing, except they want to have a formal agreement put into place. So the township approved a resolution at their meeting last Wednesday, and they're asking the board to approve the resolution today.
So do you take pictures before and after, or how do you?
We have pictures, we have a video log. We've taken cores out there to determine how much rock is out there in the past, so we know how much rock is out there, and we've also measured out the widths. So we can go out there and pretty much any measurement, we know what it is. We've also taken some traffic counts out there last week to know what the traffic count was before the detour got put in place, and I also know. So, so yeah, we'll make sure it gets back in the same shape. You know, as far as time or cost of the county, you know, maybe a couple days worth of blading, or a couple times worth of blading throughout the project. We're putting chloride down in front of the houses out there on South Prairie and Lovers Drive, and we'll pay for that cost of having those residents pay for it. And then we might have a few loads of gravel, if that, when we get done. It should be real minimal. South Prairie we've used in the past for detour when we really County 5. The state used that road as a detour when they did Truck Highway 44. So it's a roadway that's had detours on it before.
I imagine you work with Kermit on this?
Yep.
He knows about that pretty well. We did that in the Crescent Township, though. We took pictures and we had things done when we had a detour on a township road. Very routine.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be fair to the township, and, you know, all they asked is to put it back how it was, so.
You need a motion on that?
Yep. Or if you, yeah.
On County Road.
Township road.
It'll be the detour agreement to maintain the detour route across Caledonia Township roadways, which in this case would be the South Prairie Drive.
Motion to approve that.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You'll let the Kermit know?
Yep.
And the rest of the board?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the final item I have is the trees out at the airport that's on the Barsh's land. You know, the FAA contacted Houston County a couple months ago regarding some trees that are penetrating into their 20-to-1 surface, which creates a hazard into what they call the high-risk category for pilots as they come in, landing, and taking off from the runway. We went out and got a couple quotes. The low quote was Steel Construction and Landscaping for a total bid of $6,490 this week for the removal of the fencing, trees, and then the stumps, and then the disposal of those as well. So the cost would be split 80-20, 80% MnDOT Aeronautics and 20% county. So the cost of the county would be $1,298. This is one of those things where really we need to get this done to get back into compliance. Right now there's notice to the pilots indicated that there's restrictions and that they're restricted from their night procedures as far as flying in and out. So as soon as we get this done, as soon as we get the trees removed, getting the first restrictions.
It actually is a pretty cheap price for,
Yeah.
we just had some work done to it. It's a lot more than that.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Mike Steele bid for tree at your approval.
Second. Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. One other thing, so I don't forget. In front of you, there has a copy of the 2013 annual report for the highway department, so you guys can read through that in your spare time and get a quick update on your financials. And
It's pretty riveting.
2013.
Pretty
so
riveting novel, kind of.
It'll put you to sleep at night. So thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Brian, could I get copies of that steel construction bid for the tree removal? Because I don't think
You know, we can copy it right here for you.
That's right. Is this the same one I just?
Yeah, that's the
I got
original.
you. Oh, this is the
Yeah,
original.
I got a copy for our back.
Start with that or back?
When did we get this? Okay, then I think it should have been.
Okay,
If not, let me know, and we'll get it to you.
thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Tess?
Morning, Commissioners. I just have updates. Oops, I'm sorry.
Morning.
David, the agenda, I don't know if that's posted or not. I'm going to send out this today. Staffing as always, thank you. I mentioned I always appreciate the board's willingness to be flexible with, our staffing issues are not issues, but matters. I'm not dating that. I know a couple days before the meeting. So today we're looking at Sheriff's Office, Human Services, Public Health, and Environmental Services. We have several recommendations to bring forth. As we handed out information last week, subsequent to some work that our finance director had done for us, and we met with both the sheriff as well as the jail administrator, and since that time, the chief deputy has also been involved in meetings with the sheriff and the jail administrator. And as we stated last week, we currently cost out, or paying out 16 FTE jailers, dispatchers, but we aren't really receiving the full benefit of having 16 FTEs. And so at this time, we have a formal request on the table that we're recommending 2 full-time, searching and doing a competitive search for 2 full-time jailer dispatchers, with the idea that we are reserving coming back to the board for that third one. We don't know if we would need that third one as full-time capacity to half-time capacities or whatever. but we need some time to really look and see how our staffing is going and what would be most beneficial. Initially, Mark and I talked, we thought that it would be most beneficial to have potentially 4 half-time floating positions. But after, I guess, really working through the schedules, it would be more beneficial to have 2 full-time people floating. And when we call them floaters, it's because they fill in, their schedule changes potentially week to week based upon which shift needs what employee. And so we do have to fill in for leaves of various kinds and things that come up. So with that in mind, unless you want to add anything to it, I respectfully ask the board to approve going forward with 2 FTE initiatives for 2 FTE jailer dispatchers. And I do want to mention that at this time, we can wait till next week, but at this time we will be looking at asking for the ability to search 1 or more half-time positions because of the potential that we may be filling these positions from our own half-time staff.
And the same ad is what you're saying?
The same ad, and also because we will be finishing up our interviews for our lead position, which was an internal search. And we have half-time potentially, we could have, if all of our hires from this came from internal existing half-time people who are already trained, we could have 3 half-time openings, and we just keep getting further and further behind our time frame for filling them. It's having quite a lag period. So just keep that in mind that as soon as you vote on this one, I'd like to discuss that potential of what advertising at the same time. It saves us about $300 in the same ad, so I'd like to do that.
We're going on to the 3-year part of this new facility that we've had here, so we've got kind of got a handle on our staffing, where we're at. The last 3 years will show where we're at.
And we're going to meet quarterly and analyze staffing quarterly because daily rates change, potential for other contracting with other agencies. We want to make sure that we stay within the DOC rate guidelines and also keep our overtime costs down. And we want to do it in a proactive manner. So we will be monitoring this on an ongoing basis.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead with a consulting search for 2 full-time jailer dispatchers. I see how much we can save in training and uniforms and all that, and I think it's just a really wise idea.
And overtime, I know that was one of the things that really brought this up.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, real quick, and this is not specifically Sheriff's Department, but it brings up a question. I've been asked a lot, and not Sheriff's Department, but I also see Human Services is up for another hire of a full-time person coming up as well. I've been asked this question a lot, and I guess I have the exact same question. We're looking at two more jailers. We're looking at another person in Human Services. I know right now we've got more employees in the county than we've ever had. Like, we're one of the highest for employees. We get bombarded all the time with requests for computers and tablets and all this technology to try and make life easier, more efficient, all this kind of stuff. I guess I'm questioning, at what point are we drilling down hard enough to make that worthwhile? I mean, it seems like maybe we're getting led down the wrong path, one direction or the other. We buy this computer and all these fancy things because, well, it's going to be more efficient, we can reduce time and this and that, but I haven't seen that yet. I mean, it's like we always hire. Oh, we need more equipment. But that's a question that's been asked to me, and it's not just the Sheriff's Department here. I mean, like I said, there's been in all departments, but this is a good time to bring it up, that at what point are we seeing our return on our investment for all this fancy electronics and things that are supposed to be making things more efficient and reduction in time? Where's the reduction?
Very good questions, and I appreciate the questions. And I do have a couple of comments and I think and I believe an answer in part, at least, to your questions. The human services, let me just point out, the human service request for the social worker is a replacement for a retirement.
Yep.
So that is not an additional FTE, except during the training period, it certainly is. So we are fortunate in human services to have a very high retention rate and a very low turnover rate. I mean, we've had some turnover in recent times, but I don't think turnover is always a bad thing. They've become more and more efficient. The sheriff's office it is true, this is not a cost-saving measure, it is more of an effectiveness measure. And I think it potentially could be cost savings, but we're not presenting it that way. Potentially it could be because of training costs, et cetera. But we certainly are not making that promise. We believe that is a neutral position, and that just makes us more effective. And time will tell, maybe it will be more cost savings, and that's why we will keep an eye on that. To address your question about technology, a very good point. And I do not pretend to have studied this area, certainly have considered have the same questions that you have though, so I've reflected on it to a certain degree already. And because I know, for instance, even doing electronic time cards in my own area, how has that helped us? What kind of savings, if any, for our time? What technology seems to allow us to do is it doesn't replace people. There have been numerous studies in various industries and fields and disciplines as to what technology does. It doesn't save. In fact, if anything, it adds to your cost for technology. However, what it does is it reduces your transaction rates, time. And in reducing your transaction time, you may be allowed to take on, or should be allowed to do more for the client or the end user than you ever could do in previous time. And it's one of those necessary evils, if you will, just like going to, in the medical field, the technology changes so fast. I would not say that it's ever been a savings for them. However, it has potentially, hopefully, had a lot of other benefits as a result of it. And one last thought on that. We keep a very close eye. We've been tracking human service staffing. When I first came, one of the first things I did was worked with human services and tried to do a 10-year look back, so that we could see where we were going, how many people we've served, and that you've seen that form, that staffing form. And that was something that I actively came up with so we can do an analysis. And until I'd have to bring it forward, at least last year, as of last year, I think we were right at within 1 FTE, maybe less, of not having staffing increases. Yet I believe the county has experienced service increases, and certainly, so we will keep an eye on that, and I think that the only way you can really make these decisions is to have the historical data and the projected data going forward and analyzing them. But I agree with you. Technology, though, was never, from what I have read, was never a replacement for persons. It was just a tool. It hasn't replaced teachers in the classroom, and it's not going to replace social workers, and it's not going to replace jailers. The positions it has replaced, that was my last thought, I'm sorry, that you don't see is we don't have the level of clerical help, if you will, that we used to. We have people doing more of their own support work. Now, I don't know if that's actually efficient or not, an efficient use of. I think there needs to be a balance there. But that is where you have seen technology replace positions, but other than that, I haven't.
Such as your cameras and stuff. People ask me, why can't you use cameras to replace staff for inmates? Can't do that. That's not acceptable by the DOC. Cameras and computers are a resource in addition to the staff, but you still have to have the staff there to be able to maintain the inmate safety and security in jail.
So you're right, it has added to our cost. Hopefully there's been a benefit from it. That's, that's debatable. People can probably debate, but at what point are you, as the technology, really needed? But it certainly is not going to, at least from my perspective, ever save on cost, for the most part, on cost for staffing. It's just a different tool. Instead of using typewriters, we use this. Instead of having our corded phones on the wall, which I still have in my kitchen, we carry it 24/7. But thank you for, I can't disagree with you.
Well, I know like the DOC's got their regulations that we have to have X amount of people, just like human services, we have to have X amount. So I understand that, so I know it's not necessarily the sheriff in the jail that, I understand we've got regulations to follow, but it just brings up that question that through natural attrition we'll save, but yet we've never not hired a replacement. It seems like more times than not it's, well, this person retired, So I know a lot of people have come to me with that one and just said, we spent a lot of money on all this stuff, and we never see a reduction in, in stuff.
We actually have done that in public health, haven't we?
There's one lady we did not replace this last time.
And I will say something about not replacing through attrition. I fully believe that we should spend energy on doing staffing analysis and directing some of our efforts that way. And I believe our department they've been worked very closely with our office in doing that. But when we talk about attrition, and that's something that is state and federal, state and local agencies look at, you have to try to remember what was the base you started with. Now, I've worked in a much larger agency before, and we had some very flush departments and we had some very bare bones departments. And to do across the board attrition doesn't seem to make sense. So you have to ask yourself, first of all, were you at right-size staffing? Because if you're at right-size staffing, and I'm not saying we are, but if we're at right-size staffing where we are already at the most efficient for the taxpayer dollars with the highest return on investment, then attrition would be cutting off our nose to spite our face. If we're at right-size staffing, but we have people, we should redirect their energies because we don't have them doing the right thing, we can gain efficiencies that way. And I believe that's always room for improvement on that because that's an evolution that should be constant. We should always be optimizing that. If we were at as I mentioned that some of those agencies I worked with before, if we're at overly flush staffing and we had restrictions due to certain contractual things, attrition and buying out contracts is the right thing to do. So you have to know where your starting point is, and that's critical. A county directly north of us has gone through quite a bit of attrition and redirection. It's worked well for some departments and then quite a cost savings. I'm not sure how it's shaking out for all departments, but that's been in the paper and it puts pressure on us down here. But maybe our staffing levels per resident was quite different in the first place. And I believe that likely might be the case. I'm not sure. I can't speak for them. So I know that's what folks are looking at, but when I talk attrition, I'm not necessarily thinking reduction in forces. I'm thinking redirection if we're already at bare bones.
That really helped to get the sheets last week on all the facts and figures, working with finance and everybody involved. I looked them over pretty thoroughly.
Well, I know number-wise, we've got a lot in overtime and
Yes.
And I understand it's you either paying overtime or you hire, we had that discussion last week, so, like I said, it's not necessarily with this, but just bringing it up, so.
I think I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Are we also now, for this second request, may we go forward in the same, say we may have one or more half-time positions that we can fill, it will save us some money and some time. We certainly, you will have the final authority whether we hire anybody in those positions, so it isn't a risk that we'll be adding positions.
It's just a search.
It's just a search, and we'd like to do that.
That's always a good idea to have names on file. People
Well,
on file,
if in
basically.
fact these positions are filled out of our current, we need to be able to fill those.
Right. Sounds good. You need a motion on that?
Yes, Commissioner.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The last thing for the Sheriff's Office is we do have an individual that we recommend changing Jason Quandel's employment status from probationary to regular status effective June 15th this month. The Sheriff's Office has quite a detailed performance review document that they have that's multifaceted, and they really do a fine job on their performance review in that regard that they've recently initiated. And we've received that document, and Mr. Quandel more than has met the criteria to become a regular employee.
I'll make a motion that we approve changing Jason Quandel's employment status from probationary to regular status effective June 15th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because of a statewide Department of Human Service training, Tim and Linda can't be with us this morning. I told them I thought I could struggle through. So it's overwhelming. There was a consensus of the committee. Our committee on this search involved was myself, was Linda, was Tim Hunter, as well as a social worker who had experience in this particular field, trying to be a little more inclusive with our searches. And so it was unanimous that we felt that Jen Delios be hired as a probationary social worker at Step 1. She comes with quite a bit of experience from Iowa, not from Minnesota, so Step 1 isn't even 30 years of experience. It's an appropriate placement because she'll need to learn the Minnesota system. But she does many of the functions that we will have her doing here. She's very familiar with, and some of those are federal programs, so she's familiar with federal waivers. So request that she be able to make that conditional offer of an employment conditioned upon her successful completion of a criminal background check.
Sounds very well qualified. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Said she's from Iowa.
She has, we could not believe the caseload that she was handling. It was just.
So no Iowa jokes, huh? No.
She may actually instigate the Iowa jokes. Did you vote already?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I'm sorry. Okay, public health. You want to speak to your interns? I did change this from a 100-day intern to 67-day. 100-day is for students, and we could pay them up to 100, but we've chosen to leave it at 67.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have had a tremendous response to our search for internships, paid internships, a program that we kind of showcased to you before that we had authorization to move forward with. We had 5 really stellar candidates from local schools, and it was hard to come up with a selection, but we do have 2 names before you, Katie Helbeck and Renee Fuller. Katie is a student at University of Wisconsin lacrosse, and Renee is a graduate of Viterbo and lacrosse, and both of them are very excited about this possibility. We have a laundry list of jobs for them to do this summer, doing our grant work with the Towards Zero Death grant, preconception grant, and our statewide health improvement grant. So all of the dollars to support these internships will come from grant funding. As you know, grants come and go. We have more than enough work for them to do during these 67 days. And we would really appreciate the authorization to move forward with those two positions.
I make a motion to hire Katie Hellock and Renee Fuller as student interns for 67 days for public health.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. And I just want to add one point of clarification. It is not unusual to have immediately after graduation, have a post-graduation internship, so long as it's in close proximity time-wise. So I'm, just in case, and I'm not sure if she's going on to further studies or not, but that would be appropriate. It's immediately thereafter.
I think her intention really was, or is to see if public health is a place where she really wants to land. So it's a win for everybody.
That's good.
Thank you. And environmental services, we have a request to hire Derek Yogi. I'm not certain if I'm saying the gentleman's name correctly. As a 67-day employee, for drop site supervisor.
And what's for the drop site? Sure. Move to really hire Derek, 67-day hourly employee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then, commissioners, did you want me to wait until a different time frame to give you?
No, this is a good time.
Okay, I wasn't certain about that, under your old business. Last week, I met with the engineer who was doing the structural integrity study, and I believe that was on, if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday. He was here last Wednesday. MCIT, and I also spoke with Jerry Conway, who is our representative from MCIT, who was looking at this, and I relayed the concerns that Commissioner Storley and others had raised, and reiterated that we really need to get popping, if you will. And he had, and I talked with him earlier in the week, and he had informed me that Encompass was needed to come back down here. And they came back down, two of the engineers, one I believe you may have met, and another engineer he brought with him last week. And I asked him why he was back down here and we didn't have our study completed. And it was because after they determined how the level of mitigation, the level that of wall they had to take out of that building, it afforded the engineer then an opportunity to go and inspect all the joists and support walls, and he hadn't been able to do that before. He was trying to get his inspection with before the whole building had been cleaned out initially, and that was because they didn't know how much they were going to have to clean out of it. So he said the benefit of this, and this is Mr. Conway was reiterated the same, the benefit is that now if the county determines to go back and do the improvements, and MCIT then looks to see how much those improvements would cost, that there isn't going to be any latent defects that they won't have already discovered. So in other words, going back and redoing the walls, and you get into the wall work and then you figure out, oh, you got rotten beams behind it or whatever. He goes, well, we won't have that problem, so then we won't have to go back and re-examine, okay, is insurance need to kick in and pay for more. So that's why MCIT really wants to send them back down here, so that once we're done, we're really done. The joists look real good. There's going to be some minor work that needs to be done on some of the ends. The way they're hung, because they're in, on the lower level, they're into stone. But I'm told that's very minor. And they'd rather have them put into, I'll call them little metal cradles. I'm not sure what their formal name is. And there's a couple of places where there's been cuts into the joists that need to be reinforced, but I am told that those are minor and that the building is actually structurally really in good condition. I think they've done everything, all their inspections. I encourage them to get his report then submitted. I did ask them if the county chooses to maintain the building, and they said there's 4 fairly large office areas, that could be potentially office areas. We're not talking about the cells, we're not talking about the basement. So I started asking questions about ADA accessibility, because that's something we would need to know about. And we do not believe we would be grandfathered in, because we'd be new construction. And we've identified a central area, right, a staircase where you could put a small elevator internally. It wouldn't be external, so he was offering that information as well. And that's really about all I have.
Did they give you any kind of timetable?
I think I wrote an email to, I believe, but he said
Something about June 15th or something like that, I saw an email
June,
for that.
that they thought that they would have all the information that they needed and have it all done.
What about a timeline as far as our action?
Well, once you get the report, I believe you should make a determination relatively soon. I mean, and there are companies, one thing you have to think about is whether you want to apply for the $10,000 small little grants to determine whether there's how to redirect use of that facility.
I think we have that done. Did we get a grant with that reuse study for the jail? From the... Pardon? This building you talked about? Okay.
And you should have that report any time now. I've been pushing for
okay.
that report. So that was the structural report for this facility to go after some larger monies. And then I do think it would be, if you can get Mr. Connery to come here once we have that report.
Yes,
it would be very helpful to the board as well as to myself to have him here.
Be nice to have all the facts and figures in advance too, if possible, before he comes, so we have something to look at,
well,
if possible.
If having some,
that way we can
what
ask.
they'd be looking at, we should at least know. I talked with him what it is that MCIT, if we chose to keep the building, how much would our insurance pay for that interior work?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is Kurt.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm here today to talk to you about a hazard mitigation plan. We're considering filing an application for funding through FEMA to update our current plan. This plan right here needs to be updated every 5 years. This plan came about from the 07 floods. I know a lot of you, I don't think any of you were here when that happened. But as a result of those floods and the significant damage we sustained in 07, we became a part of the hazard mitigation plan. We were allowed 100% funding. We went out and contracted the consultant to come in and do all the work for us. and it cost us a little about $85,000, which was all paid through FEMA funding. So this is how the plan came about. It's a risk assessment plan. They went and met with all of our local jurisdictions, townships, and cities, and they discussed their threat assessments on their wastewater treatment plants, infrastructure, things of that nature. They went back into the history of the past 100 years on past disasters, tornadoes, floods, etc. So it's all included in this plan. That has to be continually updated every 5 years because things change. Since '07, we've been included in 4 presidential disasters in this county alone. Each time we have a presidential disaster throughout the state of Minnesota, FEMA donates and puts money into a huge fund that's administered through Homeland Security Minnesota for hazard mitigation projects. What they don't tell you, it's not just the affected areas that are eligible for that money. It's all 87 counties, whether they've been impacted or not. They can apply for these funds. These funds are used or applied for by cities and townships and counties at a 75-25% match. So basically, if you apply for $35,000, you know, we have to come up with 25% or in-kind services. So this is what I'm looking at doing. I'd like to ask for $35,000. What we would do, basically what we did back in '08, is that we put out RFPs for a consulting firm to come in and look at it. We formed a small committee of several department heads in the county here that sat down and we did several interviews with different consulting firms, and we picked out one, and that was approved, and we went forward and did our plan. Basically the same process on the update. So what I'm looking at doing is applying. It's a rather extensive application here. We have to have resolutions passed by the county board. We have to have what was the other one? Commitment of funds, I believe it was the other form I provided to you. Each jurisdiction, with the exception of the townships, have to sign letters of interest that they're going to join in. This is a multi-jurisdictional plan. It's not just a county plan, it's all the townships, all the cities in Houston County is involved in this plan. So in order for them to be eligible for future funding for any potential hazard mitigation projects they might want to have, this has to be current and updated every 5 years. So that's where we're at right now. It's kind of a lengthy process. It could take up to about a year to get this done because there's a lot of meetings that have to be done. I mean, we got to select a consulting firm, obviously. He's got to be meeting with the townships and the cities and myself, and we got to sit down and go through everything. So that's kind of where it's at. So I'll give you an example of mitigation. If we have a city in the county that say they want to bury, put all their electrical power systems underground to prevent future outages from tornadoes or whatever it might be, that would be an eligible project. We have one community that's interested right now in potentially a new community center, which would be basically, if they're approved, could be used as a storm shelter and a tornado shelter. They would be eligible for up to 75% of those costs through FEMA as a mitigation project, provided it falls under those certain guidelines. So there's a lot of potential out there. It's there if you want to apply for it, or the cities want to apply for it, but in order to do that, we have to have a current plan. So that's where we're at.
So it would cost us about $8,000 if we get the $35,000.
I come up with about $8,750. But that can be in-kind services. That would be my wages that are applied towards that for all my meetings with them and however much time I spend on that. It would also go towards any of the local jurisdictions that have wastewater treatment people, you know, anybody that's... And
that's all counted towards
that. That's all can be
87.
counted towards this. So there is, you know, there is a remote possibility we may have to come up with a little bit of cash maybe, but I don't see that going to be a problem. I think it'll all be covered by in-kind services. So.
It's kind of the way it worked before, I think, too, wasn't it, when it was done?
Yeah, same. But yeah. Back in 2008, when we applied, since we had just gone through the disaster, they paid 100%.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're not getting that this time. We're 75-25.
You need a motion to approve the plan? Okay, so moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is this for both things that he's talking about? the financial part and the
The hazard mitigation.
resolution?
The resolution. This is
Okay.
the resolution.
And then we need to do it for the financial part also, the letter of committee.
I think it's
Did
all.
I send them, please?
Yeah, I thought you were going to take care of the letter.
You want me to sign off on it, or you want one?
However you want to do it, I thought.
Well, I believe the last couple grants we've added, the board chair signed off on.
Really? Okay.
I just administrate it, make sure that we comply with all the contract obligations. What'll happen is once the application is accepted, they'll send down a contract, and then I'll have the county attorney review it, and we'll bring it to you for approval and sign off, and then we can get going on it.
So is that included in the resolution then?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Yep. All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Andy?
I take it this is coming out of Bev's budget. Thank you very much. He's watching. We already know that part, Andy.
Yeah, well, I'm here on behalf of Tom Dibbing, actually, so he wasn't able to make today's meeting. Up there, Shar, I think, has the quotes. Basically, what we're looking at is going forward with a remote client for CamVision. CamVision is the software that they use in the assessor's office to keep track of values and stuff like that. Right now, what they do when they go in the field, they take a notebook and paper, handwrite notes, come back, enter it. This remote client will allow them to check out the data from our server here, go out there with the data live, make changes, and update, hopefully increasing productivity and making their job a little bit easier. The total project, 5750 this year to CamVision, and then the maintenance contract after that's $1875 a year. The money can come out of the compliance fund, so we've already spoken to Bud about that. They would be using tablets.
We see her smiling.
This is nothing new to her, she's heard it all. We would also be purchasing some Microsoft Surfaces upon the recommendation of CamVision. That's the hardware they recommend to use in the field with these the tablets. So the price of the tablets, those are about $1,000 each. So all said together, we're about $9,750 to get this project off the ground, and that is gonna.
And just kind of like what we're doing with human services too, where they can enter the data. Wasn't it, we're kind of,
Yeah,
you know,
the human services that does a live enter. They have jetpacks. This particular module, the nice thing about it is that we can check it out without them having to have a live connection.
So you don't need to have internet there. You can just type in and then bring it back.
Right, and then it doesn't sync. Eventually, we'll be moving forward and be doing a live type situation, but baby steps. One of the things that we have to get off the ground is a wireless throughout the county to help alleviate some of that, but we'll talk about that later. We're not talking about that right now, Don't you worry. So.
One last quick question. I know Bev, when we've spoken many times before too, the concern is always making sure that the fund gets replenished, and then when we have the license agreements year after year after year, that we've got a lot of them now that seem like they're getting stacked up. We have enough money obviously.
And I'm keeping track of that so that it doesn't go down. The one question I do have, Andy, I don't know that if we clarified it, is there a maintenance agreement in this initial? And will that be every year?
It's approximately $1875 a year for the 4 licenses.
And is that going to come out of the compliance fund every year then?
After the first 2, yes.
After the first 2?
So the first 2 years we're paying for up front, and then following that it's about 18.
And that's expected to come out of the compliance fund?
Yes.
Okay. So then just so you are aware that if you agree to this, and the compliance fund would ever go away, we are obligated to pick it up then. Just
or
like all the other.
discontinue it.
Pardon me?
Or discontinue it.
Or discontinue, yeah.
Andy, you said 1875. That's for all 4 or 1875 times 4?
For all 4.
Okay.
So it's, under
So it's roughly $40-some $100, I mean, $400 and some dollars a piece, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And okay, then, I
Yep.
mean, you've got money for now?
Yep, for now.
I make a motion that we go ahead with the proposal that Andy's presented.
I'll second it.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The contract is up there for the sign. There's two.
Bob? Zoning permits?
Morning. Just going to report on the planning commission agenda from May 22nd. We had one interim use permit application on the evening there from Adam and Arlene Agadal, and they're looking to build a non-commercial family cabin on their property in Sheldon Township. The only condition that the planning commission recommended was that they follow all federal, state, and local permits.
Which township?
Sheldon?
What's Caledonia in there?
Sheldon, well, okay, Caledonia.
Is it Caledonia?
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, it
It
says
says
Caledonia.
Caledonia on the agenda.
Okay, it's Caledonia.
Okay, thank you.
3 conditional uses, one for Josh and David Getzinger, build a non-farm dwelling in Jefferson Township. And only recommendations follow all federal, state, and local permits, regulations. Darren Meyer from DeSue Holsteins had an application for a conditional use permit to expand the feedlot. Existing feedlot from 494.5 animal units to 550, and add 2 manure storage basins on the property in Wilmington Township. And last was Dylan Becker, conditional use permit for a cell tower on behalf of AT&T. I would be the owner of that on leased property of Dylan. There's 2 conditions on that permit. Of course, the federal, state, and local permits be followed. And that number 2, that he'd work with Harley Deering, the former owner, on an agreement that they had in regard to a business. So they worked through that and dropped off the agreement the next day on May 23rd in our office. So that's been taken care of.
Need a motion?
I'll make a motion for
Second. Hey Bob, real quick, that, the Sioux Holstein 550, is that as many as you can go? Or is that, what's the, is there?
We don't have a cap in Houston County.
Oh, I thought like the FPCA had, you had to get like a permit or something. I mean, not that it matters, I'm just curious.
Yeah, if it's over 1,000,
That's
then
what I
you
was,
need a
okay.
federal permit.
That's what I was thinking of.
Okay.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
So anything over 300 in Houston County need a conditional use permit.
Sure. Gotcha.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then you have the zoning permits, you need a motion to,
I'll make a motion to approve the zoning permits.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Bob.
Consent agenda, quote for the security light installation reduced for pole provider. Original quote was 2995, revised 2720, being a reduction of $275.
I'll make a motion to approve consent.
And we're getting that because Tri-County is donating the pool.
Yeah.
That was nice.
I'll
Thank you,
second
Jim.
it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unfinished business. Roxanne, Justin, you want to speak on our meeting yesterday? Or not?
What's that?
Speak on our study group.
Sure. So our meeting group, for the most part, I thought went pretty well yesterday. We talked a lot about continuation on setbacks from property lines and residential areas, and we talked about, we touched a little bit about groundwater as far as saying depths and stuff for intrusion into groundwater. I thought it went well. A lot of good discussion. It seems to be a good group of people where we can we do quite a bit, play the devil's advocate and try and look at it from a lot of angles. So other than that, I guess it's kind of a brief summary. Anything else you want to add that I missed?
Next week, no meeting next week.
2 weeks at 10 o'clock, right?
Yes.
2 weeks at 10 o'clock, same place.
It was just a mistake with the 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Highway Department, I suppose Steve is still,
I spoke with Brian last week, and he's going to talk to HSR and try to coordinate a date when they can stop in and give us some insights.
sounds good. Slowly moving forward, huh?
Slowly.
And we already got the courthouse historic jail issued from Tess. I think it was good to have it right with her report rather than her doing it. Commissioner reports, Dina?
I had no meetings last week, but I'd like to ask what, as long as my name is on this bit of mandamus, what is it and what are my responsibilities? Do we need to get to the attorney?
I
I know we
got
can't
hold of
talk
the
about it.
attorney right away yesterday.
I've never heard of it, but I'd like to know.
And they will get back to us on what we need to do.
Okay,
It's in the hands of our attorney.
They'll let us know. No answer yet, they have to check it out.
When is it? What's the response time? When does this happen?
Friday.
Okay.
This Friday?
This Friday? All right.
Supposedly.
But they won't let us know.
Okay.
Because he said he has
Yeah,
to do
please
some
do.
research.
Please do. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
The other thing I had was a Fraxan's meeting that I just talked about.
I had nothing.
On Friday, I met with Teresa and Brian and Jake at Wildcat, along with the Craig Boomer from the DNR. And we talked about what the DNR could do to help out Wildcat. And they're going to check into putting new boat ramps in down at Wildcat, which would be a wonderful.
They're talking about concrete ones? Like we did the
Yeah,
concrete?
yeah, they're all over the place down there right now, and so they're looking at leveling them. He's hoping that we can maybe get it done in the next year. So we'll just keep in touch with him. The playground equipment's been ordered, and when it gets here, we're going to be looking for volunteers who would want to help put it together, so we can do it in a day of volunteers all putting it together. So if you know of anybody who wants to volunteer, just let me know, and I'm going to be compiling a list. And then, okay.
And Dick said he would too.
Okay, great. And I also had a Hiawatha Valley Mental Health, I gotta write these names down, I'll forget. Okay, I had a Hiawatha Valley Mental Health meeting last night, and we're working on proposals for financing our Hiawatha Bluffs living facility for people with mental health issues. It's more of a long-term goal. It's something, it's a piece of the puzzle that we haven't been able to fill yet. And we're working on donations and grants that we'll have to match funds with donations. And it brings more to light about all the issues that we have in our county with mental health, and it's good we take as proactive approach as we can for helping them. And that's all.
And since Judy and Justin already gave my report. I was really glad that the person from the DNR met us last week because we really could use their assistance. And they will definitely put in for money for it. So that's a real good thing. And then meeting. Okay. Discussion item. Approve claims, human service, and license center disbursements.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Approve peddler's license for Charles J.D. Swartz.
Let me ask you a quick question. Right below that, it says hold a public hearing to allow for renewal of peddler's license?
Correct.
Okay, what's the difference? He's new and this is a new renewal, or?
Actually, he wants to renew it, but right now we don't have anything in our policy for just a simple renewal. I had a call after this guy came in from Luke Sass, and he asked if we would consider amending the ordinance and provide that if someone goes through the whole background check and pays the big fee, the first, or within a year, they're only good for like 30 days. Then anytime within the year, they can come in and just do a renewal.
And they don't have to go through all
And not
that
go through
work
the whole-
again, right?
Correct, just
Which
pay
makes
a
sense.
$25 fee to renew as many times as they want within that calendar year. But each calendar year, they have to go through the entire process and then do the background check and everything.
So he went through the entire process again for this one?
Correct.
Okay, so it'd be, next time, he wouldn't have to.
Correct,
Yeah, which makes sense.
yeah.
So at this time, we could approve his license.
Correct.
Number 2.
Sure.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve peddler's license for Charles Schwartz.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And now we need a request to hold a public hearing to update our ordinance. Be held next Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Nope, June 24th.
Oh, June 24th. The month is flying by here.
And actually, we're going to go 9:30 a.m. because we have a conflict with the 10 o'clock slot. If that's okay?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, need a motion for that?
All right, motion for the public hearing at 9:30 for peddler's license renewals on the 24th of June.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And approve a tax abatement.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Bruce and Sandra Eddy tax abatement. It's been approved by Tom and Shar.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Reminders or next department? Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next department head meeting is June 24th. Stephen Friesa.
I forgot to give a report.
Oh.
I also had department head meeting,
Okay.
and it was really a good meeting for discussion on just understanding policies and things of the staff. So it's really a good meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I was going to add one item before we adjourn. On that June 24th, it's probably going to be a long day already, but we should have one of those strategic planning meetings because we should have information on that jail. Like one of those where we meet
Oh, yeah.
to discuss what our options are.
We can still do that if we could add that in, I think, later.
I
if we
was
have the
thinking
info.
of having one like our last strategic planning.
Like at 1 o'clock or something?
Yeah.
Well, 1 o'clock is department head. I was thinking right at noon. Bring a sandwich.
Pack up, bring a bag lunch.
Do you like that idea?
We do that, or do you want to do it the week after, right after we get the information, then we don't have to pack it all in one day?
That's fine with me. I just think we,
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
okay,
Do it
first,
week
because we're
July.
going to have to make a
The week
decision.
after.
1st of July.
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. Now, there was a motion to adjourn.
And a
Thank you
second.
so much.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.